inside was in a mess. Chucky said he'd been possessed, but my mommy said that he was off his rocker. So I asked my pal the shrink just to see what he would think. And the doctor said the whole case was a shock. Well, Chucky finally met his match, and it all ended in a flash. Now he won't be back to terrorizing people. This is the end, my friend. On that you can depend. But you never know, there still might be a sequel. C-H-U-C-K, why don't you come out and play? Listen up, fool, I'll tell you why. 'Cause Chucky's bad, that ain't no lie. Chucky, go away. You're too rough when you play. Over in the corner now, peekaboo. Howdy, howdy, I see you. C-H-U-C-K, why don't you come out and play? C-V-5-5-4-4-4, my name's Chucky, baby, here I come. Ollie, oxen free, Drupal love or take green. Here I come now, ready or not, I'm gonna get you no matter what. Mommy says you practice voodoo. You practice voodoo. 3 feet more day, oh Doombala, give me power. Chucky, it's the end. Gee, I thought you were my friend. Heidi, ha, my name's Chucky and I'm a star. Chucky, don't you lie, cross your heart and hope to die. I see you laughing, you think it's funny, well I'll show you who's the real dummy. C-H-U-C-K, why don't you come out and play? Listen up, fool, I'll tell you why. 'Cause Chucky's bad, that ain't no lie. C-H-U-C-K, why don't you come out and play? Over in the corner now, peekaboo. Heidi, ha, I see you.
Tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons from the Patreon page. That's Cecilia Spears, Hawaii, Carl Leakins, Catherine McClear, Sean Campbell, Iron Alexa, Allison Seib, Ryan Woodward, TikTok12, Bree, Bonanza Jellybean, and Kai Antez. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. And if anybody listening right now enjoys the content of the 80 Slasher Librarian YouTube channel and would like to help keep it going and growing for a long time to come, then click the link in the description below and sign up on Patreon for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select, such as the $2 tier gets you the early access content, the $5 tier gets you the early access plus a free ebook emailed to you every 3 months, and every 12 months you get a free gift from the merch store. There's also a $15 tier that gets you a free gift from the merch store every 6 months, a free ebook every 3 months, and you can appear on the podcast and voice a character in an audiobook narration once per month. So there's many choices to choose from. Just click the Patreon link in the description below and check it out. Child's Play 2, The Novelization. Chapter 24. Andy heard Mrs. Pool's steps in the hall. One of the kids had cried out in his sleep. They always did that here. This was a place where kids cried, where they had nightmares. He heard Mrs. Pool saying goodnight, sleep tight, trying to act as if she cared, as if she were a mom. But that's all it was, an act. It was really just her job. He lay there, feeling how heavy his eyes were, but not knowing whether he would be able to sleep. He wondered whether he should get up and check the door again, check that the chair was still wedged against that doorknob. Though he guessed that wouldn't stop him, not Chucky. Nothing would stop Chucky. And if I do go to sleep, he thought, how long will it be before I cry out, before I scream for help? He lay there listening to the building, the tiny sounds, the creaks, the knocks, the terrible stillness of a building filled with sleeping children. Then the bell began ringing. He shot up in bed. The bell was loud, ringing terribly clear and fast right outside his door. He heard it echo through the whole building, the ringing rumbling from other floors. Then he heard the screams of the kids running down the halls, their screams joining, turning into one more terrible sound. It's the fire alarm, Andy thought. The fire alarm, the building's on fire, and I have to get out of it. He slid off the bed and moved to his door. In the darkness, he didn't see the chair at the door, and he bumped into it. He pulled at the chair, but was surprised to feel how strongly it was locked under the doorknob. The kids screaming and crying, too, filled the hall outside now. He could imagine them, especially the little ones, not big 7-year-olds like himself, falling on the cold floor and lying there, waiting for someone to get them. He pulled at the chair again, and it moved and popped away. It sent Andy tumbling backward. He hurried to open his door. And when he did, he saw the big kids, the teenagers, smiling. And some of them looked at him and yelled, "Fire drill!" Andy looked left and right, and then he sniffed the air. "I don't smell any smoke," he thought. "I don't smell anything burning. And I know what burning things smell like because I smelled Chucky burn. I know what that was like." He hesitated a moment and then joined the stream of kids running down the hall to the stairs. A few of the floor counselors held the hands of the really little kids, holding them tight. The bells kept ringing. Andy walked to the staircase. He saw the lines of kids disappear, hurrying down the first floor and out the door. He grabbed the railing and followed them. He was halfway down when he looked at the bottom of the stairs, where everyone was rushing out the door. Someone was standing there, right at the bottom, waiting for him. It was Kyle. He said her name as he took a step after step down.
"Kyle?"
he said. And he saw who she had with her. He saw Chucky held tight, his head right near her shoulder. He stopped moving. But Grace Poole came from behind and grabbed his hand. "Come on, Andy, let's get down and see what's going on here." She tugged at his hand. He grabbed the railing as hard as he could. Mrs. Poole turned and looked at him. "Andy, come on, we've got to get out." She tugged at him. "Out of the..." And again, "building!" And this time, his hand slipped off the rail, and she pulled him down the remaining steps, down to Kyle, down to Chucky. Mrs. Poole didn't see them until she was at the hallway. "Kyle?" she said, looking up. "Kyle, what are you doing here?" Andy tugged against the woman, but her hand was locked on his. "What is this? What are you doing here, Kyle?" Kyle didn't say anything. Andy saw a bloody mark on her head. Then he looked down at the broken glass at her feet. Mrs. Poole looked down as well and saw it, and she looked back at the smashed glass window of the fire alarm behind her. She dragged Andy a few steps closer. "You did this, didn't you, Kyle? You came back here and did this." Mrs. Poole turned and told some of the counselors to get the children back inside. Then she pulled Andy along as she pushed Kyle into her office. Mrs. Poole moved closer to Kyle, and Andy wriggled on her arm, trying to squirm away.
"No!"
he pleaded. Kyle shook her head. Andy froze, watching her, knowing what she was going to say.
"He did it,"
Kyle said, nodding toward Chucky. What? Mrs. Poole said, then angrier now. "What are you talking about? Is this your idea of a joke, Kyle?" Andy watched her take another step closer to Kyle. Kyle was standing as if she were a statue. He saw Chucky perfectly still. In one of Chucky's hands, he held something next to Kyle's neck, something thin and black. "Your caseworker's going to hear about this, Kyle. I can guarantee that. Just as soon as we get everything settled here." She reached out and grabbed Chucky. "Now give me that," she said. Kyle moaned.
"No."
Andy slipped out of Mrs. Poole's grasp as she pulled Chucky from Kyle, not noticing that Chucky held something in his left hand. She looked down and then she saw it. "What's this? What in the world is this? What is this thing?"
"No!"
Kyle yelled. Andy backed away, and Chucky came to life. He turned and looked right at Mrs. Poole. His fingers worked a latch at the end of the black thing, and a blade popped out, cutting right into Mrs. Poole. She gagged. "Amazingly lifelike, isn't it?" Chucky said. He pulled the blade out and jabbed it in again, faster and faster and faster. He laughed. Andy watched, stumbling back, tripping on a chair, falling against the wall, in and out, laughing until the woman staggered around the room, grabbing at the air. Chucky used his free hand to hold on to her blouse, which had suddenly changed from a starched white to a gummy red. Mrs. Poole spit at the air, trying to say words. She tumbled toward a big gray machine in the corner. A copy machine, Andy knew. Her head slammed down on the flat surface of the machine, and she must have hit a button, because the machine shook and began making clicking noises. Papers began flying out of a slot in the end of the machine, piling up until they started slipping out of a small tray, dropping to the floor. They were pictures of Mrs. Pool's face. Andy could see the pictures. They showed one big eye open and lips pulled back from teeth, and great big blackish specks that he knew in real life were red. Someone grabbed Andy's hand. He looked up. It was Kyle.
Come on!
She said. She pulled him toward the door. Andy let himself be pulled, not really sure where she was taking him. After all, there's no point in running, he thought. We know that now, don't we? Just no point.
Come on!
Kyle yelled again. Kyle ran out of the office into the hall, pulling Andy behind her. Chapter 25. Andy saw Chucky's small red sneaker kick the door and slam it shut. It banged on Andy's hand, separating him from Kyle. The door slammed shut. Then Andy felt the bloody blade against his throat, and he thought, "This is Mrs. Pool's blood." It dripped on Andy while all the time the copy machine kept whirring away, belching up pictures of the nice woman's head. Chucky reached up and locked the door. There's no way to escape Chucky, he knew. No way at all. He heard Kyle pounding on the door, screaming,
Andy! Open the door! Open the door!
The blade, the trick blade that popped out from nowhere like magic, pressed against his neck, and Andy stayed perfectly still. Kyle kept pounding. "Okay, sport," Chucky hissed in his ear. "We're gonna have a little game of Chucky says. You understand?" Andy nodded. Then he heard something in the distance, but growing louder. Sirens. He saw Chucky look at the window. The sirens were right outside. A red light flashed on and off in the room. "Shit," Chucky cursed. It's not nice to curse, Andy thought. Chucky shouldn't do that. It's just not nice. The copy machine kept shaking and grumbling. The red light flickered on and off. Chucky turned to Andy, his face sneering. "God damn it!" Kyle kept pounding. Chucky tilted his head to the open window. "Chucky says, move your ass." Chucky directed Andy with the blade, guiding him over to where Mrs. Pool lay slumped. He had to step in a red pool on the green rug. It looked almost blackish. Andy stopped moving. He stood there and watched the woman's lifeless body. It looked like something he might see in a museum, some stuffed animal in the African Hall. Chucky slapped him. "Snap out of it. You act as if you've never seen a dead body before." Andy reached up to the open window and grabbed the sill. He pulled himself up, helping by Chucky pushing from below. Friends to the end. Heidi-ho. The door was a solid piece of wood, and Kyle's pounding was doing no good. She looked down at the doorknob, at the lock, and had an idea. She ran a hand through her hair and pulled out a bobby pin. Then she crouched in front of the lock. She bent the pin into a probe and began to dig around in the lock.
Just like they do in the movies.
She thought, but her fiddling did nothing. The door remained locked, even after a few tantalizing clicks inside the lock.
Damn it!
She said.
Give me a break!
She heard the sirens outside. Soon there would be policemen here, maybe firemen. They could chop the door with an axe, but by then it might be too late. She heard a different sound from the lock, a more solid click. She grabbed at the knob and gave it a violent twist. The door opened. She saw the empty office and the open window, with the curtain blowing in the cool night breeze. "Just move your ass, sport. Just keep going." Andy nodded. Chucky was on Andy's shoulder. He had his legs wrapped around him, and he had one arm on Andy's neck. His other hand held the blade right next to Andy's skin, jiggling up and down, scratching with every bouncy step that Andy took. Andy let Chucky's legs direct him. This must be what it's like to be a pony, Andy thought. Kick, go, left, kick, go, right, and then a tiny press of the blade. Don't you dream of stopping, kiddo. They passed the kids who were standing on the lawn, laughing now. It was like a party out here with the bright lights from the fire trucks and the scary costumes of the firefighters who were running in and out of the building. Andy saw one little kid crying, looking around for anyone bigger to pick him up. But Chucky just kept him moving away from the corner, off the lawn and down the street, until the sounds faded and all he heard was the rustle of Chucky's good guy corduroys rubbing against his neck. Chucky gave him a sharp kick. Andy, who had been running, looking down at the sidewalk, looked up and saw a van just ahead. The back door was open. "There we go, sport," Chucky whispered in his ear. Then, "Now get the hell inside and hurry." Andy nodded, making the blade scratch his neck again. Kyle got to the window and looked out. For a second she couldn't see anything, just the lawn filled with out-of-control kids and all the firemen. The red lights kept flashing in her face, blinding her. Then, all the way across the lawn, she saw someone running away. For a second she thought it was an adult. It had to be an adult too tall for Andy or Chucky. She watched the figure for a few more seconds, and she knew who it was. Chucky, riding on Andy's back, using him like some sick animal to carry him away. She started to go out the window, and then hesitated.
He's not my kid. He's just another kid with no one who cares about him. So why should I get bashed around any more for him? It's not my problem.
She considered. But then she thought,
That's it. He's got no one, just like me. He's all alone. The hell he is!
She said out loud to herself as she climbed out the window. Kyle had to weave her way through the kids, nearly knocking some of them down, stepping around giddy groups of boys and girls. She followed Andy and Chucky to the sidewalk.
He hasn't seen me,
She thought,
and I know I can go faster than Andy. He's just a little kid. He's just 7.
She saw them closer now, and she saw the van with the open back. Andy ran up to it and popped the back door open even further.
No!
She said, running full out as fast as she could, gasping for air.
Those lousy cigarettes!
She thought, fighting for wind, feeling the terrible burn in her lungs. She watched Andy carry Chucky into the back of the van, and then the door slammed close. A man hurried out of a building and got into the front.
Hey! Hey, you!
She yelled at him, but she heard his door close and knew he hadn't heard her. But she tried yelling one more time.
Stop!
The engine started up and the lights came on. She was thinking, no, don't pull away. She was almost to the van. She saw Andy's face against the glass, and right next to him, Chucky, leering and grinning at her. As the van's engine revved up, she saw the switchblade against Andy's neck.
He's not crying.
She saw.
Why isn't Andy crying?
The van screeched away and Kyle staggered to a stop, gasping for breath. But she knew she couldn't stop. She couldn't. The van disappeared down the street. Kyle found Joanne's wagon where she had left it in the ditch, looking dead and useless. She saw the windshield, the tiny shards of glass littering the front seat. She ran around to the driver's door and got in. The keys still dangled from the ignition. She slammed the door shut and caught herself just as she was about to give the engine some gas before turning the key.
Can't flood it,
she told herself. She took a breath. She turned the key. Fitful clicks. The idiot lights flashed on.
Oh, come on! Start, you big piece of...
she said. She rammed her foot down on the accelerator, and the car snapped to life, the engine roaring.
Okay, Now if I can just get this suburban nightmare out of the ditch.
She thought. She tried to go forward, but the wheels were pinned, and she saw a spray of mud shoot up into the air. She tried reverse, and the car backed out of the ditch. She gunned it, flooring the accelerator until the wagon backed up onto the road. She shifted into forward and steered down the street in the same direction taken by the van. The air buffeted her, blowing into her eyes, sending her hair swirling.
Where are you?
She thought. If that van had turned, she could easily miss it. She ran a yellow light that threatened to slow her down, then a red one, and she wasn't going to stop for a cop. Then, just ahead, she saw something. She drove faster down another block. It was the van.
Thank you.
She muttered. The van was stopped at a light. Just when Kyle was only a block away, the light changed to green and the driver turned.
Damn!
Kyle said. She took the corner on two wheels, both of them screeching. She leaned to the side right into a chunk of window glass. The van took another corner, but this time when Kyle got to the same corner, the van was gone. She kept on going, thinking,
How could it have just disappeared?
it wasn't parked on the street. It must have turned right away at the next intersection. But then she passed an alleyway and happened to look down the narrow strip that cut across to another block, and she saw the van. She cut the steering wheel hard, pushing the wagon as fast as it could go. She was into the alley before she wondered if the obese car would fit. Maybe it will get stuck, she was thinking. Maybe the damn car's too wide for the alley. But it careened down the alley, barely fitting, picking up garbage cans and boxes along the way, scattering them in front like the cowcatcher of a train. She saw sparks flying from the side, where the car scraped the wall of the building, the warehouse. This is some kind of industrial place, she thought. Lots of big dark buildings. Something about that bothered her. What was here? What was... She rocketed out of the alleyway, sending the garbage cans careening across the street. And now the van was close, just there, ahead.
I got you, sucker!
She said, and then, more quietly,
I'm coming, Andy. Just hang on.
Chucky tightened his grip around Andy's neck. He moved the blade from the side to just under Andy's chin. When Andy gulped, he felt his Adam's apple rubbing against the blade. Say your prayers, Andy. It's time. I can't move, Andy thought. I'll just have to let him do this. He heard Chucky say those words again, dumb words that made Andy feel dizzy and sick.
Hate Dewey Dembella. Give me the power, I beg of you!
Then the back windows filled with light. It blinded Andy, and it blinded Chucky. He blinked. The blade moved from Andy's neck a bit. The lights, really bright lights, flashed on and off, on and off. Andy couldn't see the car, couldn't see who was driving. The lights flashed off again, and he saw Kyle holding the steering wheel of the station wagon like a crazy woman. Chucky saw her as well. Damn it, he said. Kyle started blasting her horn. The bitch is too late, Andy. Too late. Chucky cackled. He shot Kyle the middle finger, and then he turned back to Andy. Kyle passed the van, pushing the wagon as fast as she could. She drove abreast of the driver and yelled to him.
Pull over!
The driver gave her a look as if she were an escaped mental patient.
Pull over!
She repeated. The van driver only picked up speed. No way, Buster, she thought. She floored her pedal and threw the wagon in front of the van, cutting it off. The van hit its brakes, screeching. Kyle stopped the wagon just before it went flying onto the sidewalk. She jumped out of the car and was met by the driver, who was about 6'2", with one mighty displeased puss on him. Kyle was running to the back of the van when he grabbed her arm and squeezed it with sufficient force to stop her dead in her tracks. "Whoa! Just what do you think you're doing?"
Let me go!
Kyle yelled at him. She tried to pull away, but the man just tightened his gorilla grip. "What is the matter with you? Are you crazy or—"
Right.
Kyle thought.
I'm crazy.
She gave him a quick kick to his knee. Her arm was freed instantly, and she ran to the back of the van. The door was open, and the back of the van was empty.
No. Please.
Kyle turned around and looked everywhere. She finally saw Andy still carrying Chucky on his back. They were running back to the buildings, the warehouses. The driver started coming for her. Kyle screamed out the boy's name and ran after them, while the driver yelled at her. "You crazy brat!"
Andy!
She called again, and she kept her eyes on Andy, now in darkness, now catching a bit of light from a naked light bulb by a door. Chucky's taken him someplace, she knew. He knows where he's going, as if... She heard something moving, up near the top of a building. It was the heavy clanking of machinery, moving back and forth, following a repetitive rhythm. She kept running while she looked up, and she saw a giant good guy, a monster-sized good guy looking down at her, waving at her. "Bye-bye, Kyle, you'll never catch me. I'm home, babe, this is my place," she thought. Her foot got caught in a crack on the street, and she fell, grunting, slamming her elbows hard against the ground. She landed in a puddle that sprayed her with muddy water. A few gritty drops landed on her lips, and she could taste them. She looked up, just in time to see Andy disappear down a dark alley, right under the sign that said, "Play Pals Toys." She jumped to her feet and started after them. Chapter 26. Just keep moving, Andy boy. Just keep those little legs of yours pumping. Andy nodded. This is where he was born, he thought. This is the place where Chucky came from. And then he thought, no, Chucky didn't come from here. He came from someplace else, someplace evil. Now cut down here, sport. Move it! Andy turned. His back and his neck ached. Chucky rode him like a pony, kicking at his sides, telling him where to go, and always the knife jiggled at Andy's throat. But when Andy turned down the alleyway, he heard sounds, a truck's engine, and voices. "All right, stop, right here." Chucky gave him a kick, and back up over to the corner. Andy backed into the corner of the building. While he stood in the darkness, Chucky could lean out and peer down the alleyway. "Yeah," he said, "we can get in there, in case anyone's following us." Andy leaned a bit forward until he could see the truck. A machine was dumping boxes into the back of the truck. Boxes of good guys. One last box tumbled in, and then the workman pulled the sliding door, sealing the back of the truck. One of the men ran around to the front, to the driver's seat. Andy heard the engine start. The other worker turned a key, and the metal door on the factory entrance began coming down, slowly. "All right," Chucky hissed. "This is it." The other man hurried to the truck's cab. Andy heard the man laugh. The truck roared away, making a big turn. "Move it!" Chucky yelled. "Move it, you little creep!" Andy ran for the loading doorway, leading inside the factory. As he got to the door, he noticed how slowly that it was coming down. He stopped at the steps leading up to the loading platform and the door. "I don't want to go in there," he thought. Then Chucky kicked him hard. "Inside," he said. Andy nodded and took a breath. The knife was always on his skin, always touching his neck. He walked into the building. Kyle saw them go inside. She also saw the truck disappearing down the block. And from too far away, she saw the great metal door to the warehouse gliding shut. "I'm not going to make it," she thought. "There's no way." Chucky gave Andy a sharp kick. "The runt learns fast, and I like a good little horse." The boy stopped. "Because," Chucky thought, "I got to see this." All around them were mountains of dolls, hundreds of plastic faces, hundreds of flaming redheads who just wanted to play. The boxes towered above them, in piles stacked like little buildings, with alleyways and small roads crisscrossing the warehouse floor. They must be doing pretty good with all these good guys. Maybe, after all this is over, I'll work on getting a piece of the action. Wouldn't that be a rip? He thought. He jiggled the blade against Andy's neck. "We're home, sport." Chucky looked back at the stacks of dolls. "If only I could command them," he thought. "Make them all come to life and work for me. Now wouldn't that be something?" He leaned closer to Andy. "And it's time to play." He rapped the back of Andy's head with the handle of the switchblade, hard as he could, just above the brainstem. "It doesn't kill them. It just knocks them out real fast." Chucky jumped off as Andy fell to the ground. "Now," he thought, "we won't be disturbed, and nobody will make a big deal about finding a good guy doll here, even if it's all smashed into 1,000 pieces. Gee, I don't know, must have been a manufacturing mistake. It happens." He stuck the knife in the back of his good guy coveralls and grabbed Andy's body and turned him over. "Close your eyes and count to 7. When you wake, you'll be in heaven." The boy was out cold. Won't even know what hit him, Chucky thought. He looked around at the stacks of boxes that surrounded him. "This is it, world. From here on out, no more Mr. Good Guy." He leaned forward. His movement felt so smooth, so natural. Must be getting used to this little body, this little doll's body. He placed his hand on Andy's forehead. "Ade, Dewey Dembala," he whispered. He heard a machine in the back, probably just another conveyor belt. "Give me the power, I beg of you." There was a crack of thunder and he smiled. "Give me the power," he whispered again. She ran full out, watching the door glide shut. "I'll never make it," Kyle thought. "Never." She got to the steps and bounded up them 3 at a time. A lightning flash appeared from nowhere, and startled, she jumped away from her shadow on the warehouse wall. The door was nearly shut, about a foot left. She yelled, "Stop!" and as another dull thud of thunder boomed just overhead, Kyle rolled to the ground and spun her way to the closing door. "I'll either roll right through," she thought, "or I'll get stuck and it'll crush me." A belt loop on her jeans got caught on a bump, a nail. Her roll was stopped as she watched the door creak down another inch.
No!
She yelled. She fiddled at her butt, trying to free the loop. It popped off, and with a terrible grunt she threw herself through the crack. The top of the closing door scraped against her shoulder blades, but it didn't stop her. She rolled inside and heard the door slam shut, sealing her in as the unnatural storm raged outside. Chucky raised his voice to be heard. After all, there was so much thunder and lightning, so much. "I feel your presence, he thought. You're here with me. Chucky screamed out his chant. As Chucky repeated his chant for the last time, the thunder and lightning stopped. Andy opened his eyes. He didn't see anyone. Where's Chucky? What happened to him? He felt the pain at the back of his skull. It throbbed, flashing on and off, like one of those blinking lights used to mark holes on the road. Where's Chucky? He thought. Then a thought. It happened! It happened! We swapped souls and I'm Chucky. I'm a doll and... Something plopped on Andy's forehead. Another plop on his cheek. It ran down to his lip. He tasted the salty, sweet taste of blood. He reached up and tried to catch the next drop. Then Andy saw that he still had his own hand. It was his hand reaching up, a human hand. I'm not a doll! But Chucky's hand caught the drop. Andy twisted on the floor to get a look at Chucky. His nose was bleeding again, overflowing with blood that was dripping onto the ground. Andy saw the terrible way that Chucky looked at his hand, looked at the blood. He looked so confused, Andy thought. Confused because he's supposed to be me. It didn't work. It didn't work because he's too late. Andy watched Chucky's face twist and turn, the plastic flesh rippling, the glass eyes shining wide. Chucky slowly raised his fist into the air and filled the warehouse with his voice, screaming. Andy tried to slide away despite his throbbing head. I just want to lie down, he thought. I don't want to hurt anymore. Chucky turned and fixed him with his evil, glassy eyes. You little shit. He took a step toward Andy. Do you realize, he said as loudly as Andy's mom had been when he broke the sugar bowl, what you've done? Do you? Another step. Know what you've done to me? Andy kept trying to slide backward. He bumped into something. He turned and looked at the stack of good guy dolls. It's too late, Chucky said, staring hatefully at Andy. I've spent too much time in this goddamn body. I'm trapped in here. Andy watched as Chucky dug around in the back of his good guy coveralls. He watched him pull the switchblade out. And you're trapped, Chucky gestured at the warehouse, in here. With me. Andy tried to stand up, but he was frozen. There didn't seem to be any place to go, and his head hurt so bad. Then the boxes exploded from behind him, dozens of them tumbling down onto Chucky. A few bounced on Andy, smacking his head, crashing into his legs, but Chucky was buried. And he heard a voice, Kyle, yelling at him from above.
Run, Andy! Get up and run!
Kyle, she's here! Just her voice was enough to get Andy scrambling to his feet, stepping on to the good guys in their plastic boxes. He looked around for Kyle. He whispered her name. Much too quietly for her to hear, he knew. He just wanted to hear the sound himself.
Kyle?
He kept looking around. He finally saw her hurrying down a ladder from above. She was still yelling at him.
Come on!
Kyle said, reaching the floor, waiting for him. Andy ran as hard as he could, even though his head still hurt, and he felt sore all over. He pumped with his hands, thinking, I'm almost next to Kyle, and we can get out of here and leave Chucky and all the others behind. Kyle's hand reached out to him.
That's a boy.
She smiled. He took her hand and she pulled him, running, nearly dragging him off his feet, flying down the aisles of good guys. Andy turned once and watched them, looking at the faces watching him. He told himself not to do that again.
There's got to be another way out of here. Some side door or something. And...
she said, but every turn Kyle took brought them down another alleyway to another wall of good guys. Like a maze, Andy thought. He knew there were some mazes you just couldn't get out of, no matter how long you tried. They came to an intersection. Kyle stopped. Andy saw her bite her lip. She looked up one alley, then another. Then she looked down at Andy.
This way,
she said, pulling Andy to the left. But Andy knew she didn't have any idea where to go. We're lost in a maze, he thought. He ran behind Kyle now, growing tired. He heard a sound, a machine noise ahead of them. There was something ahead, something... The wall exploded, and Chucky leaped at him from behind a wall of good guy dolls. He grabbed Andy around the ankles.
No!
Andy called to Kyle. Kyle turned and saw him as he fell hard to the concrete floor. It won't take him long, Andy knew. Just a quick cut at my neck, that's all it'll take. He wants me dead now. Andy turned over just in time to see Chucky crawl on top of him with the knife, moving fast now, too fast for anyone to do anything. But Kyle had taken a giant step toward Andy and she kicked Chucky in his little ass. It was a good kick, Andy thought. No, a great kick, he thought, as he watched Chucky go sailing into the air over the stacks of dolls.
get up!
Kyle yelled at him, pulling his hand. She led him straight ahead, straight toward the noise, to the machine. Then Andy saw it. Kyle stopped to look at it and study it. There was a big conveyor belt entering from a gap in the wall. It was completely covered with a fence, creating a tunnel effect. Good guy boxes moved down the belt and tumbled into a giant bin. The fence keeps the boxes from falling off, Andy saw. The boxes of good guy dolls were dumped in a great pile at the other end. It doesn't seem as if they need any more good guys, he thought. Don't they already have enough? He heard something from behind him. Little steps. He turned and tugged at Kyle's hand.
I know. This way.
She said. She pulled him to the open end of the belt, where the boxes tumbled out. There were steps there and a platform. Andy knew what Kyle wanted to do. Kyle climbed the steps, pulling Andy up with her. He held her hand tightly. I know what she wants to do, he thought, but I don't know if I can do it. The belt was moving fast, dotted with good guy boxes. The wire tunnel sealed it in. There was just this opening, and another one somewhere at the other end, in another building through a wall. In another building where the good guys are made. Andy heard more footsteps. When he turned and looked back, he saw a shadow moving down the alleyway. Chucky's shadow, holding his knife up high. Kyle took his chin in her hands.
Think you can do it?
She asked. Andy looked at the belt rolling towards them. He knew what she wanted to do. He nodded.
Good boy. I'll go first. You just follow me and do what I do.
She said. Kyle jumped onto the belt and started walking. For a second, she didn't seem to go anywhere. But then she took more steps, and she grabbed at the mesh of the tunnel, pulling herself forward. When a good guy box came along, she just stepped over it.
Come on, Andy. Come on.
She said. I'm not as big as Kyle, he thought. I can't take such big steps. I can't go as fast. But Andy stepped onto the belt and immediately felt himself being whisked backward into the big dumpster filled with dolls. But he grabbed at the fence to try and hold himself in place. Then he ran. When he got just a little bit ahead, he let go of the mesh and ran a few more feet. Kyle turned to look at the front of the belt, at the hole leading into a different building. Andy hurried to catch up with her. But at the same time, he turned to look backward. He saw Chucky climbing up to the platform, up to the opened end of the conveyor belt. Andy didn't see the next good guy box in his path. He tripped on it. and then he was flat on the belt, speeding backward, back to Chucky. Chapter 27. Andy felt himself tumbling backward to the dumpster filled with brand new good guys, back to Chucky. Kyle stopped at the opposite end of the conveyor belt, at the opening to the other building. She turned and yelled at him,
Andy, get up! He's behind you! Please, get up!
Andy dug at the rubber ribs of the belt, as he also turned around and saw Chucky crawling behind him. Andy watched Chucky grab at the mesh while he jabbed his knife into the belt, pulling himself along.
Andy!
Kyle kept yelling, and then from behind him, Andy heard the same word. Andy! I can't look back at him, Andy thought. If I look back at him, he'll get me. He saw Kyle leaning into the hole, reaching out for him. If I can just get to her hand, she'll pull me out, I know it. Now he heard the thud as Chucky's blade dug into the belt. He's right behind me, Andy knew. He's right at my feet, my ankles, he'll grab me. Andy felt the tips of Kyle's fingers. Then Kyle grunted and reached in. Her hand closed around his wrist. Another grunt and she pulled him through the opening. Into another place. The place where they make the dolls. No. He looked around the room. No, this is the place where the machines make the dolls. They stood on another platform, and Andy had a few seconds to look at the conveyor belt as it wound its way through the factory, past all these strange machines. He saw headless good guy bodies, and a machine that stuck heads on them, and then another machine like a big dentist drill that stuck eyes into the head. He turned to Kyle, who was looking back into the hole, looking at Chucky. She looked up just over the hole. Andy saw metal grating. Kyle reached up and slid it down, covering the open hole that led to the warehouse, just as Chucky got there grinning at them. Go away, Andy thought. Go away and leave me alone. Kyle hung her whole weight on the grating, and it slammed down, right on Chucky's hand. Andy watched Chucky's hand get trapped between the grating and the metal wall. Kyle snapped the lock shut on the grating's latch, while Chucky screamed. Andy saw the blood dripping from the doll's wrist. He writhed like a fish on a hook, and he pulled at his wrist trying to free it. Boxes of new good guys jammed against the closed hole, but there was no wire tunnel covering the conveyor belt here, and the boxes of finished dolls bunched up, pressing against the mesh, bumping right against Chucky's wrist, before they tumbled to the floor.
Come on, Andy,
Kyle said. Chucky looked up at Andy. Go away, Andy thought. Leave me alone.
Come on,
Kyle said again, and she pulled him off the platform. More boxes clattered to the floor as they ran away. Down the steps, Andy heard Chucky saying, rattling the locking gate, Come back, you fuckers! Come back here! Come back, you little bastards, and maybe I won't hurt you so much when I catch you. Chucky looked at his wrist. The mesh had pinned it to the metal, and the barbs were dug straight through. Straight through what? The flesh, the bone, the plastic? What am I now? And what am I gonna do about it? First things first. The old Gree-Gree. Show me a way out. There has to be a way out. He wished he hadn't killed the old priest, using the old man's mojo. I didn't think I need him anymore, he remembered. I sure as hell need him now. Blood spattered from his trapped hand every time he tried to pull or twist it. And the pain, it was a Class A pain, white-hot pain, pain that made his eyes fill with brilliant red splotches. Total pain. And they're getting away. No, he thought, he couldn't allow that. They'd send people here and they'd find me. And boy, wouldn't that be fun. He took the knife and wedged it between the grating and the metal frame. He tried to pry the grating up. If I just get a few inches, he thought. Just a few inches and I can get my mangled hand loose. The grating started to buckle upward, even as the barbs dug into his wrist, chewing up whatever kind of flesh he had. It's moving, he thought. The grate is moving. The blade snapped. It broke off from the handle as if it were a kid's toy. Oh, great, he moaned as the grating fell back into position. Now the blade was stuck in the frame. He looked up. He saw the girl. Oh, he had something special in mind for her, leading the boy to the other side of the factory. He looked at his trapped hand. He knew what he had to do. He felt the sweat on his brow running down his good guy nose, dripping onto his lip. He took a breath. Yeah, he said. Then he started twisting, writhing, and turning, working his arm this way and that, back and forth. He screamed. His eyes went red with the pain, but he kept at it, back and forth, as if working a piece of thin metal, trying to snap it. He groaned, snapped it in two. His arm came flying back, dripping tendrils of blood and bits of torn plastic. He saw his hand still trapped, with the wires leading from it. But I'm free.
Which way?
Andy asked Kyle. Kyle squeezed his hand.
I don't know, Andy. There's got to be a door out of here.
They walked past a tremendous vat. It smelled like bug spray, and from the steamy hiss it made, she knew it was hot. As they passed, she saw a dripping spigot on the side. Small dollops fell onto the stone floor. She read what it said by the spigot. Caution. Overflow release. And next to the vat, the conveyor belt carried the torsos of good guys. A machine spit heads out onto the belt, squeezing them onto the bodies. Kyle watched, fascinated. The heads had no eyes.
Which way?
Andy said.
Let's try this.
Kyle said, running to the right, hurrying, though she didn't know whether they were moving closer to the some exit or farther away. She only knew that they were following the path of the conveyor belt. They passed another machine, this one shaped like a giant X. When a body arrived, the machine snapped closed, like a dry cleaner's steaming pants press. When it popped open, the dolls had arms and legs.
This is wrong. We're heading back to the hole, the place where Chucky is trapped.
But when she looked behind her, she saw that the conveyor belt looped back past another machine. She heard a rhythmic tat-tat sound over and over as the dolls rolled up to a machine that stapled the red hair on top of each doll's head. Then, just past that, another machine with two long metal fingers. The last step, she guessed. They jabbed at the dolls, sticking eyes in their dark sockets.
We've got to get out of here, or I'm going to lose my mind.
Kyle said. Andy nodded.
Yes, but which way, Kyle? How do we get out?
Kyle turned all the way around without seeing an answer to Andy's simple question. While the conveyor belt tried to pull him back, he held on to the grating, waiting for an idea. He let go of the mesh and snatched the broken blade from its trap between the grating and the frame. The belt started carrying him backward. He took the blade and jabbed the broken end into his bloody stump. He screamed and fell to his knees on the belt. The pile of good guy boxes was just behind him. No time to give in to the pain, he thought. No time at all. He looked around, searching the work tables he rolled past, looking for what he needed. The blood was gushing out of his stump, streaming down the blade he had just jammed into the bloody mesh of wires. He turned around and saw a platform at the end of the conveyor belt. He hopped to the side and saw a table below, which had just what he needed. He grabbed the roll of silvery duct tape off the work table. He brought it up to his mouth and bit the end. He pulled the tape out as far as he could. Then he wrapped his stump in it over and over, closing it tight near the blade, sealing the wound, and then on up his forearm until the blade was secure. He stood and jabbed at the air. The pain was still there, but it was ebbing. He slashed left and right, thinking, "This gives me great control." He made a few more slices and jabs before looking around. "Time to get the hell out of here and find them," he thought. "The girl first, and then Andy. Nice and slow. Unless... should I keep the boy alive? Just in case. Maybe I'll need him." He would figure that out later. He sniffed the air, smelling the weird mixture of plastic and blood, and said, "I hate kids." He hurried to the other end of the warehouse, away from the conveyor belt. Okay, Slashaholics. This has been chapters 24, 25, 26, and 27. A very long upload for you guys of Child's Play 2, the novelization by Matthew J. Costello. Before I get too much into, my review and discussion of these 4 chapters, I made a note of something in particular I wanted to bring up. When Chucky's in the, the maze of boxes and everything, he makes a comment saying something like, "Wish I could make them an army," and it just struck me funny because that's actually the plot of Cult of Chucky, when Charles Lee Ray figures out how to possess multiple dolls. So I thought that was kind of cool that Matthew J. Costello wrote this novelization back when Child's Play 2 came out. No idea what the future of the franchise held, and he wrote in, because this wasn't in the movie, this was thoughts Chucky had only in the book, about turning these dolls into an army. And it makes me wonder if Mancini, Don, had ever read the books. I'm sure he has, at least I would think he had. Maybe at some point. Maybe that's what gave him the idea for the whole Cult of Chucky idea. Who knows? But I thought it was kind of cool that way back in the Child's Play 2 novelization, a little seed was planted for what would be the future of the franchise with the last movie, and probably with the Sci-Fi Channel TV series coming out soon. But anyways, I really enjoyed these 4 chapters. The best conclusion of a slasher flick in that era, I think. Because Child's Play 2 is just arms and legs beyond Child's Play 1. I love Child's Play 1, but Child's Play 2 is superior and is one of the best slasher sequels of all time. That one and the original Halloween 2, neck and neck for being the best slasher sequel. And this whole scene at the Good Guy Factory, because it plays out so long, and we're not cheated anything, there's a lot of suspense, and I just really love the way that Mr. Costello wrote this entire scene so far, and it's not even over yet. It got stretched out a lot further than I thought it would, but and I love the frustration in Chucky, once he does his chanting and everything, and he's finally like, "You know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna kill him." That's pretty much his mentality, and that's what makes the end so terrifying. Before, it was about, I gotta stop, I gotta get away from Chucky, because he's gonna steal my soul, and now it's just like, I gotta get the fuck away from Chucky, he's gonna fucking kill me. So, yeah, the suspense with Kyle trying to rescue Andy, and then both trying to get out of there, going through the maze of good guy boxes, and then the whole conveyor belt scene, I thought it played out even more suspenseful in the book than it did in the movie. And of course, I've got to give props to Cecilia Spears and Bonanza Jellybean. Y'all are doing great jobs as Kyle and Andy. I really love the scenes where Kyle and Andy are in the same scene talking to each other, because I think both of you play off each other so well in those scenes. Really enjoying it. This has been one of the most fun books I've had the honor of narrating here on the channel, And editing might be a lot more work than any other book I've done, but it's worth it. I think it's been a great project, and I hope the quality's good. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And, only one more upload to go. That'll be the conclusion of Child's Play 2. I'll have that out to you very soon. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and this is it, world. From here on out, no more Mr. Good Guy. Have a great night, everybody. I'll see you next time.